All right, today we're going to dive into one of the most talked about and honestly one of the most controversial ideas from Napoleon Hill's classic book, Think and Grow Rich. We're talking about sex transmutation. The whole point here is to just break down what Hill was actually saying in his own words so we can really get to the heart of his argument. So this is it. This one quote is the entire foundation for what Hill has to say about genius. And it's a really bold claim, right? I mean, what could he possibly mean by that? How can our most basic biological drive hold the key to creative power? That's the mystery we're going to unpack. So, to really wrap our heads around this, we're going to break it down into 5 parts. First, we'll look at why Hill thought this drive was so uniquely powerful. Then we'll get clear on what he actually meant by transmutation. After that, we'll dig into the link to genius, see how this stuff might apply in the real world, and finally, we'll check out the historical figures he used to try and prove his point. Okay, first things first. For Napoleon Hill, you can't even begin to understand genius until you recognize that sexual desire is the single most powerful human emotion. He basically argues that its intensity is just off the charts, so much so that it can be harnessed for things that go way beyond its obvious physical purpose. According to Hill, this energy really has 3 potential uses. The first 2, well, they're pretty obvious, right? Keeping the human race going and maintaining our health. But it's this third one. The idea that it can transform mediocrity into genius, that's the really wild idea at the center of his whole theory. And that brings us right to the main event, transmutation. Now, it's absolutely crucial we get Hill's definition right, because his entire argument really hangs on it. And, it's probably not what you think. Hill's definition is actually really simple and straightforward. To transmute just means to change energy from one form into another. You can think of it like a hydroelectric dam. It doesn't stop the river's force, right? It just converts it into electricity. It's a process of conversion, not suppression. And this is probably the most important distinction to make. Hill was super clear that transmutation is not about repression or shame or celibacy. It's actually the opposite. It's about taking this incredibly powerful natural drive and consciously redirecting it from a physical goal to a creative one, whether that's starting a business, coming up with an invention, or creating a piece of art. He had this really great river analogy to drive the point home. You can't just stop a river. It's too powerful. All you can do is build a dam and redirect its flow. He argued this emotional energy is the exact same way. It's always going to find an outlet. So the art of transmutation, as he saw it, is all about choosing a constructive outlet instead of just letting it find a less productive one on its own. Okay, so this brings us to the biggest claim of all, that this redirected energy is the actual fuel for genius-level thinking and those big creative breakthroughs. So how in the world did he think that actually worked? Hill laid out what he called the 10 mind stimuli, things that can basically kick our brains into a higher gear. And I mean, just look at what's number 1 on the list. He put the desire for sexual expression above love, above the desire for money, above music, above everything else. He called it, quote, by great odds, the most intense and powerful of all mind stimuli. And this all leads to Hill's very specific definition of a genius. For him, it's not about being born with a super high IQ. A genius is simply someone who has figured out how to ramp up their mental intensity, to get their mind vibrating at such a high level that they can tap into knowledge and ideas that just aren't available in our normal, everyday state of mind. Hill called this little gateway the creative imagination, or the 6th sense. You can think of it as the source of those sudden aha moments, those gut feelings, hunches, flashes of inspiration. He argued this channel only really opens up when the mind is operating at that higher intensity, connecting us to what he called infinite intelligence. Now, to make this sound a bit more practical, Hill actually laid out a process he saw inventors use. Step 1, stimulate your mind, using one of those 10 stimuli we just saw. Step 2, concentrate like crazy on the problem. But step 3, and this is the key, you relax, you clear your mind, and you just wait for that creative imagination to deliver the answer in a flash. Okay, so that's all the theory. But how does this energy actually show up in the real world? Well, Hill had some really specific observations about how it manifests in a person's personality and their ability to influence others. He claimed that what we call personal magnetism or charisma is literally just this vital energy in action. He said you can feel it in the firmness of someone's handshake, you can hear it in the musical quality of their voice, you can see it in their posture, you can sense it in the thoughts they project, and you can even see it in how much care they take with their personal appearance. So after studying thousands of successful people, Hill noticed something weird, a pattern. He found that most people didn't really hit their stride, didn't achieve their greatest successes until after a certain age, and that age revolved around this number, 40. So what was his theory? Well, he figured that most people don't achieve massive success before they're 40 because in their youth, they tend to just burn off all that energy through physical overindulgence. It's only later in life, he argued, that people learn, and often they learn completely by accident, to redirect that same energy into their careers and their big ambitions. But he made a really critical distinction. Raw sexual energy by itself, he said, is like a cyclone. It's incredibly powerful, but it can also be uncontrollable and destructive. He said it's only when you combine it with the emotion of love that it gets a sense of purpose, balance, and good judgment. For Hill, love was like this safety valve that makes this powerful energy truly constructive. And finally, to try and prove this whole idea, Hill looked to history. He argued that if you really study the lives of the world's greatest achievers, you'll find evidence of this secret force working behind the scenes. He listed a whole bunch of famous people, including all the names you see here. And he basically claimed that when he researched their biographies, he found that every single one of them had a highly developed sexual nature. Their genius, he argued, came directly from their ability to channel that powerful energy into their life's work. He even used Napoleon as a kind of cautionary tale. Hill argued that when Napoleon was inspired by his love for his first wife, Josephine, he was unstoppable. But after he cast her aside, he lost that balancing, motivating force, and that's when his downfall began. For Hill, this was proof that the source of that loving inspiration is absolutely critical.
And so, in the end, it all comes down to this one question. Hill claims this fundamental human energy is a double-edged sword. It can build a genius, or it can create a total wreck. The deciding factor, in his view, isn't the energy itself, but whether we understand it and whether we consciously choose where to direct it. It's a pretty powerful idea to think about. Thanks for tuning in.